There we go. Awesome.
Sorry about that.
Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Super excited to have you all. Tonight we will be featuring some amazing women in higher education, leadership roles within higher education. I am Lauren, for those of you that don't know me. I am headed into my senior year at Westminster. Excited to see some Westminster representation here as well. But to start, we'll go ahead and go around, and I'll have you guys just, kind of give us a little introduction as to who you are and what you do. So I will call you out since we're all in different orders on each other's screens. First on my screen is Candace, if you don't mind going first.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Candace Okello. I serve as the Associate Dean of Student Affairs at Westminster College. In my role, I oversee 3 areas: student conduct, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as the first year experience.
Awesome, thank you. Next is President Richardson.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kathy Richardson. I'm president at Westminster College, having just completed my 5th year here.
Awesome. And Carla?
Hello, I'm Carla Martin. I'm with Eastern Gateway Community College. I am a senior vice president with the Office of Institutional Diversity, and I also am over grant management and student success measures. So a lot on my plate.
Awesome. Angela?
Hi, everyone. I am the coordinator of the Writing Center and the Language Learning Resource Center at Youngstown State University.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, Amanda.
Hi, at Eastern Gateway Community College, we believe in excessively long titles. So like Carla, I have a couple commas in my title. I'm Senior Vice President of Marketing, Communications, and Strategic Initiatives. So I, in my portfolio, have public relations, advertising, social, digital marketing, regular role marketing, and then strategic initiatives is just a really fancy way of saying whatever President Gagan tells me to do.
Love that. So next we'll start with, if you guys can just tell us a little bit about your career path, maybe what brought you to higher education, and all of the different steps that you've taken along the way to get to where you are. And I guess we'll just go ahead and go in the same order. So Candace?
Sure. So I started in higher education back in 2011. When I went to graduate school, my assistantship was actually in residence life. So that was my gateway into higher education. I honestly hadn't, after I graduated from college, I didn't actually intend to go into higher education, but it was that graduate assistantship that really changed my trajectory. So I worked in higher education, I worked in residence life for 3 years at Duquesne University. And then I transitioned to doing multicultural affairs and diversity, equity, and inclusion work at LaRoche University for 5.5 years. And then I came back to Westminster, and I've been serving here as the associate dean for a year now. So that's kind of the institutions where I've served in the different functional areas. So it's been a great ride. So I've been in higher ed for almost 10 years now.
Thank you. President Richardson.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Lauren. I began my career in higher ed back in 1979 at my alma mater, working in student affairs and offering support for our music program in the public relations area. And then went and completed a master's degree at the University of Georgia, and then taught as department chair in the Department of Journalism at the Oklahoma Baptist University for 3 years, before joining faculty at Berry College in Northwest Georgia, where I was for 30 years, a faculty member, a dean, an associate provost, and provost before coming to Westminster 5 years ago to serve as president.
We're so excited to have you at Westminster. Carla.
Well, let's see. I actually am on an off beaten path, so to speak. I actually started my career as a licensed mortician. And so I actually ended up on a board of directors that had an ABLE program, Adult Basic and Literacy Education Program in Garfield Heights, Ohio. And then I began teaching and loved it. And so when I moved to Steubenville, I decided to do the same and give back and teach and volunteer in that program, which led me to also teaching developmental and tutoring. And from there, I ended up running the very small program here in Jefferson County, which I think our grant was $117,000. And I ended up running the program because we were actually second from the bottom in the programs in the state. And within a year, I took us from a 17% pass rate to a 73% pass rate. And then the very next year I was above 80, and I've not been below 90 since then. So, and I did something very special with developmental education here at the college, which got recognized by SHIO and the Ohio Department of Higher Ed, which then kind of, when you start doing things like that and writing grants that went from $117,000 to $1 million, you kind of get recognized for your abilities. And that's kind of how it happened for me. I'm blessed, and I feel very honored to be with you ladies this evening. So I almost want to say I lucked into my position because I absolutely love it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. We're so excited to have you tonight. Angela, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, hopefully I'm still on my career path, but I have been at YSU in this role this is my 14th year. So I perhaps am not on the same kind of trajectory as some of you, but I love helping students, and I really I think I'm representing maybe more of like the staff position in here rather than the typical faculty or administrative path. But I think right, all of our entities are necessary in getting students to the place they need to be and achieving their success. So it's and I'm from Youngstown and went to Youngstown State. I did teach for a while at Kent Trumbull and assist in their writing tutoring program before settling back at YSU.
Awesome. We're excited to have you. Thank you. And Amanda.
I'm the new kid on the higher education block. I've officially been in higher education just since January of this year, but I had been working with Eastern Gateway Community College for about a year prior as a consultant, and that's where I came from a public affairs firm. I started my career working in campaign policy. I've probably the most wild trajectory to higher ed as well. I started my career working in campaign politics. I was hired as the communications director and spokesperson for Ohio Governor Ted Strickland during his tenure in office. I went to a public relations firm that specialized in mostly business to consumer campaigns, although I also always, with my background in politics, took on our public affairs project. So whether it was a campaign to reduce infant mortality or the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, I did always find myself in sort of public affairs and public support campaign. Although I did also work with White Castle. They were one of my favorite clients. And then went back to working in public affairs, where I came from Remington Road Group, or at a small firm called Remington Road Group, and then was recruited just recently to join the team at Eastern Gateway. But I think, and it's what drove me to make that change to Eastern Gateway Community College in the middle of a pandemic. Might not always be the most wise time to change jobs, but the mission is just incredible. So I think that is sort of one thing that's the string through my career, is that it's always been about public service and finding ways to be part of something that's bigger than just my career.
Awesome. You're hinting at a question that we'll get to in a little bit. The next question that I have for you all is, can you share a little bit about maybe what your biggest challenge has been throughout your career and how it has helped you grow as an individual, as a professional? And I'll let you guys go in whatever order you choose. Not everybody at once.
Well, this is Carla. I'll go. I think one of the greatest challenges of in being in this position is trying to help those that do not want to be helped. And because I being part of ABLE, which, you know, is Adult Basic Literacy and Education, which now is Aspire, those victories in there are just like really awesome. These are people who never thought they could get a high school equivalency, or people who've been out of school for years that need to be bridged into college, and helping these people make those achievements. It's almost like you did it yourself, you know, like, oh, you know. And I think that when we meet that person who's here because their social worker told them they had to, their probation officer said you have to do it, and you're pushing harder than they push, it's almost deflating. And but it taught me that if they don't want it, you cannot want it for them, and you have to push yourself to a point to help the ones that want it, and celebrate those victories, and help everybody, but really push the ones that want it. You know, that's where your focus has to be. And I think the other issue in higher ed that has been a huge challenge was the and it sounds crazy because I'm in administration, but the administration part of it, when you need something done and administration is like, well, you know, we're gonna talk about this, and it's like, no, it needs to be done. Like, this is the pathway. I can see the end. And so sometimes that's really difficult in higher ed. And there's a reason for that now that I'm in administration, and I try to communicate that. So what has taught me, being on the flip side and working as a person, as a member of the faculty or a member of the staff, it has taught me that if I am transparent and communicate with them, they appreciate that a whole lot more than if you just, you know, take it under consideration. You know, you let them know this is the reason why this has to be taken under consideration. So I think that's been really helpful for me to see both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. I very much relate to some of the things you said. On campus, I am also a tutor, and we see a lot of the same things. So that's definitely something for sure. Anyone else?
You know, Lauren, I think it's hard to identify the biggest challenge. You know, I think I'm clearly the oldest one on this panel, so I have a lot more years to reflect on challenges, perhaps. But, you know, there are two or three ways in which I have faced challenges from which I've grown. One was being a full-time faculty member and a full-time doctoral student. During my early years back at Berry, teaching a full load, having the responsibilities that come with being a scholar servant at an institution, and doing a 2.5-hour drive to and from class for a couple of years was a challenge. I think sometimes I'm still tired from that challenge, but it really did teach me some very valuable things in terms of focus and avoiding procrastination, you know, identifying what needs to be done and getting it done. And that still bears me in good stead some 3 decades later. You know, I think another challenge, I think for all of us, is finding, I'm not sure I love this term, but finding balance in our lives. It's so easy to spend, you know, 100% of your energy and focus at work, and then 100% of your energy and focus with your family, 100% of your energy and focus in other volunteer activities. And, you know, those numbers don't add up well. I'm not an accountant, Lauren, but I know that, you know, 100 plus 100 plus 100 is not really possible to sustain. And I think one of the lessons that I've had to learn repeatedly is how to balance commitments with time for strength and reflection and personal growth. And I think that that's perhaps a challenge that I still face every day. But it's an important thing to think about when one is younger and starting a career or maintaining a career.
Absolutely. Super important to note, and a lesson that I have had to learn myself through the past year for sure. Anyone else?
Well, I think I'll jump in there on the balance because I said that I run both the Writing Center and the Language Learning Resource Center at YSU. And so my master's degree is in English. And so my focus is the writing aspect of it. And I've taught, developmental composition and writing 1 and 2 and honors. And, my bachelor's is in professional and technical writing. So I've taught, those courses, business writing as well. And yet then they said, oh, well, because of the pandemic, we're going to let go of the person who is running the tutoring for Hebrew, Chinese, Latin, Italian, Greek, French, Spanish, American Sign Language, et cetera. And now you are going to run that center in addition to everything that you were doing. So trying to figure out, well, how do I make that all happen? And then it also happened, and they said, and you're going to do this with mandatory furloughs. So this past year, I'm sure for every single person, right? It's been a challenge. But I think then you have to reassess all of those other things, like Dr. Richardson was just talking about, but my family needs me, and my kids have to get to school still. And for a couple months for me, it was online learning with them. And this was a real challenge for everybody. And so I think that we've all grown and found that, even if things were uncomfortable, we found a way through it. So.
I want to share this just because I've recently had an opportunity to reflect back, because somebody asked me the other day how I don't know how to say it accurately, but basically I don't get too riled up when I am criticized. And somebody who said, that's amazing that you can do that. How did you learn to do it? And so I reflected back, and very early on in my career, being in a very public position in the governor's office, I literally received hate mail. I had an editorial written personally about me in the India Times, which, if you've ever had the population of a subcontinent read something bad about you, I assure you, it does not feel good. But I think, and it didn't give me a thick skin. In fact, I'm still pretty thin-skinned, but it gave me the ability to just recognize it, find a way to talk about it. I always, I have my husband and my friends and my colleagues that the second I get it out, I let it go. And so it was really just kind of reflecting back on that the other day. It was when I was living it, it felt horrible. But now I realize, looking back, I've developed a really nice way to cope with criticism and feedback. And it's particularly important in public life to be able to do that and to do it in a healthy way. So that is something that I guess it's kind of twofold of, but mostly, don't ever let go of those lessons you learn early in your career, because you're going to see them realized in ways you never imagined as you move forward.
I appreciate you all sharing, because I can relate in a lot of ways. When Dr. Richardson, you're talking about being, full-time faculty and also being a full-time doc student. I'm a full-time administrator and also a doc student, and I struggle with the same of trying to find that balance, because when I get off, I just don't even have the bandwidth to read or to write a paper. And I have an assignment due tonight, and I'm just thinking to myself, is it going to get done? And so I'm constantly having to ensure that I find that time to get things done, while also trying to be fully present at work as well. But also one challenge that I've had throughout my career is I've consistently found myself in positions where I'm building the plane while also flying it. Maybe not so much in this role as I have in previous ones. Specifically, my last job, I started the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I was the first person to ever occupy a DE&I role there. So I didn't have anything to build from. I was building from the ground up. And so you can imagine what a lot of that grassroots work looked like, and how much I was carrying by myself. I was an office of one. So I learned a lot about myself in that. I recognized what my capacity was, but I also realized as I was moving forward, the importance of that, ensuring that other folks are carrying their responsibility with you. And so I've really ensured that as I continue to do that work, that folks recognize the responsibility in helping to move the work forward. So I'm grateful for that experience because I learned a lot. It has equipped me in so many different ways, but it also given me a different perspective about how I engage my current work. So I'm grateful.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. That's awesome. President Richardson, I don't mean to single you out, but you are the first female president at Westminster. As you stepped into that role, were there any challenges in being that first woman, the first female trailblazer on our campus?
Gosh, that's a great question, Lauren. And, after 165 years, I think it was time for the institution to think about a female president, Shirley, and I appreciate given that honor and that responsibility. I think that it took some adjustment, I think, for many people. I still get teased by a longtime resident here in the borough about how I was misintroduced a couple of times by folks who just somehow, I don't think it was intentional. It was a slip, but it was just, I think, sometimes hard to think about me being the new president, a female. But I think most people have been extremely gracious, and frankly, some of our alumni and alumni as well, were just really happy to have, a female at the institution. I have not found any specific gender challenges. The past 5 years have been full of other challenges. Let me just say, the last 16 months filled with challenge that I think gender had very little to do with. But I do think that having the background I had, because I taught for, almost, decades as a public relations communication person, Amanda. And I will say that I think bringing that background to this role, and I think as a female, where people perhaps are more willing to approach with a little more gentleness, perhaps in some situations, that having that ability to listen, what I'm trained listening, has been helpful. And I don't know that that's particularly gendered, but I do think that in our culture, perhaps women, we give ourselves a little more time to listen and to be inclusive in our conversations than perhaps not. So that may be a non-answer, Lauren, but I will say I take every day very seriously that responsibility of being the first woman, because I do want to leave a tradition, a good example for whoever comes after us at Westminster.
Absolutely. Thank you. I can tell you last semester, I was working on a research project with Dr. Du Bois, and each different group within that class had to research some former president or multiple presidents. And it was great kind of thinking through that, hey, in a few years, they can be researching actually a female president. And we were looking at a bunch of men from 100, 200 years ago. Crazy. Super excited though. And you also kind of hinted at the next question that I have for you all. What kinds of challenges have you guys seen in higher ed recently? Obviously, the pandemic is going to be top of mind for a lot of people. So whether it be the pandemic or something else that you're working on, I know Candace, maybe like the DE&I stuff that you're working on might be a really great thing to talk about. That's all new, and I know that from my perspective as a student on campus. It's a great change to see. But any challenges that you guys have seen recently and how you're working through them. And again, I'll let you guys go in whatever order you choose.
I'll start it off since you kind of mentioned me. So hearing that question made me think about our socio-political climate and how and issues of injustice and how that has informed how a lot of institutions are kind of rethinking their work and their policies and their practices more so than they have, I think, in years past. And being more intentional in that. I think it's necessary. I think we can draw upon history in a lot of ways where there were those moments that have informed how institutions have progressed. And so I think this is another moment for us to be reflective about that. And I think through the strategic planning work that we are currently doing for DE&I think is going to help to move our institution forward in a way that is necessary. I think we can't be complacent, because students, I think students are tired and they don't want to have to continue to fight, to be present, to fight, to have to just exist and feel comfortable and to feel safe and to feel seen and to feel like they belong. And so we have a responsibility to ensure that we are creating a space for all students and really center their identity and their experiences as we're thinking about our policies and our new practices. So I'm excited about the work that is happening with a lot of other colleagues and faculty to be able to move us in the right direction. So I think those are my first thoughts.
I'm excited about it too. As a student, I can tell you I've seen so much change from a diversity aspect in just the few years that I've been on campus, and it's awesome change. It's great change to see.
Glad to hear that.
Anybody else like to share?
I think I can piggyback hers. I know that, COVID was really hard for a lot of people, but I think Eastern Gateway was in a very good position with that because most of our student population was already online. So we kind of knocked that barrier down and it was pretty much easy for us. I remember I'm over developmental education. So we were not online and it literally took us 2 days to get it up and running and online. So I think we met that and did some amazing things with that. But I think during COVID, that's when I was appointed over from workforce education into the diversity office. And so as Candace said, it's one thing to fly the plane and another thing to have to build it as you're trying to fly it. So that's kind of where we have been with diversity and starting your advisory groups and doing those things. So it's been really, really difficult starting something from scratch, but it has been so rewarding learning and looking at the data and seeing where we're right, where we're wrong, and creating positions that's actually going to help the Hispanic population, bridging programs such as my Aspire ESOL program to help out those that need that have the language barriers, that need the help and the assistance. So it's been a tremendous wake-up call, and it's also been a tremendous education for myself to see that we actually, because you think, oh, it's running so well, we don't have problems. We do. And I think that has been an eye-opener for me to know that there are problems, there are complaints that these people had nowhere to turn to. And on top of that, there are people who now I get to celebrate, and they are celebrated now. And I think along with, there's negativity in the world, but there's also times to celebrate in the world. And I think that as part of the diversity and student activities, we have been able to celebrate a lot here at Eastern Gateway. So I'm very, very thankful for the Office of Institutional Diversity.
You know, I would just speak to that. I think one of the things that, you know, certainly COVID posed tremendous challenges for our institution. We're, you know, a traditional, highly residential campus, and God bless our faculty. You know, back in March of 19, we moved from being all in person to being online or some type of hybrid delivery in about 10 days over our spring break. And I will, you know, I will say one of the great lessons I learned from COVID was an even deeper appreciation for the commitment of our faculty and staff, who just really transformed the educational experience to ensure that our students could continue to reach their own learning goals. And, you know, with that, I think this fall, as we welcome students back to campus in a very different environment, because we took very seriously the mandates for masking and physical distancing. It was continued to be challenging in a number of ways, but it was so inspiring to me to see how our community worked together. And while I would not voluntarily walk back through the last year and a half, I will tell you, I hope I carry that sense of appreciation with me, because gosh, it could have gone a very different path. And it really showed me that people who are committed to something will go to great lengths to make it work. And I think that our students were committed to each other, and our faculty and staff were committed to our students. Our alumni were committed to providing support. And, you know, on days when it seemed as though mandates from the state or federal government were changing every 4 minutes, or from the NCAA in terms of athletic competition, it was nice to have that community to rejoice in. I loved that word, Carla. You know, we need to be able to find joy in what we do to give us the energy to get through the days that are particularly challenging. So I will say I hope my greatest memory of COVID is going to be able to think on that and hold that as a strength as we move forward.
I think one of the things that's been most interesting is we have read these news articles throughout the, you know, particularly, I guess, maybe the last 6 months, that women were increasingly leaving the workforce. And so what we have seen is that our student population is majority women, attending part-time, first generation, Pell eligible, or considered economically disadvantaged based on their FAFSA information. So I think that's one of the things, Dr. Richardson, like you said, I feel really good about is that women are not dropping out of the workforce. They're taking this time to take on their next workforce. And we're certainly seeing that in our student population.
That makes me so excited to hear.
I think if we're looking at higher ed, I don't know, potentially larger. I don't know if YSU. I suspect by looking at Akron and such as well that other universities are having to kind of figure out how to right size. You know, we went through and it fell to one of, you know, where my department is that, you know, we merged departments, we merged colleges, and I'm on the Dean's Advisory Committee, and you know, we were at the university going through an academic program review, and you know, we're kind of making some tough choices here about, you know, how can we best serve the community in Northeast Ohio, you know, so that we're not overlapping with, you know, some of your schools and others, and that we're providing students an opportunity, you know, to get programs, you know, that fit their needs without tons of duplication. And, you know, there's an incentive right now to have some of our faculty retire, you know, take a buyout. So I think, but I don't think we're alone at Youngstown State. Like if you look across the country, I think this is happening more and more. And so I think that that's a real challenge though, because as much as it, I think everybody has to be, make data-driven decisions. There's going to be those two students in a program who, went to the university for that program and they had amazing faculty members. And I'm not saying that anyone's going to ever, turn away from them, but those next two students who were just about to start that program are not going to get that opportunity. We've been asked to sunset some programs at our university, and I think other places are potentially doing that too. And we've tried to make I think some moves with like academic partnership to increase our online presence. There's a bottom line that people are looking at, and again, there's report cards now that are, helping us make these decisions, but it's really hard to say, but you've got spirit and faculty members who have passion projects. Like one of the other things that I do is I'm one of the co-chairs for the YSU English Festival. If you've heard of that, we have about 3,000 students come to campus every year, which was also hard to navigate and suddenly, put that as an online program for the past 2 years. But we're looking forward to being back on campus. But those are the things of like, well, where is that reflected in a report card, right? And there's narrative sections as well, but that's hard to somehow quantify that good work that so many of our community, do in conjunction with our faculty members. But and again, I think that's a story across the country that might be happening.
Awesome. You guys shared some really awesome things there, and we appreciate it. I appreciate it. My next question for you guys is, what really inspired you to pursue a career within higher ed? I know some of you landed here not necessarily intentionally, but something that kind of just happened. Can you tell us more about that path and that decision to make the step over into higher ed and what that looks like for you?
Well, I can start since I'm the newbie and had the most irregular trajectory. It was our students, frankly, and I have that. I can say that because I worked as a consultant for a year prior to joining the college. But with the program, we offer free college to labor union members and their families in Ohio, in our service district, and across the country. And that is where you really, really see the impact of higher education and the impact it can have, not only in terms of changing someone's economic status, but just in terms of changing their lives. It was something that we would hear so many stories about. I never, ever thought I could do this. I never thought I would do this, but it was free. So I thought, hey, why not take a chance? At graduation, I spent, I think, the entire time crying, running and getting a Kleenex. We had several married couples who walked across the stage together. We had several mother-daughter duos. One in particular who I had the opportunity to meet and talk to. She, the daughter told me, my mom, who I'm graduating with today, dropped out of college because she was pregnant with me. And, I'm the oldest of 3 daughters. And today we're walking across this stage and my 3 daughters are in the audience. And so it was a moment like that just, that was why I took this job.
I would say for me, it was actually my experience as a student at Westminster. And I've told the story many times, but I was a student who lived in the diversity services office. That was my safe space. The director, she was everything to us students, us Black students specifically. She was the reason why a lot of us were retained, the reason why a lot of us graduated, because of her presence and support. And that was my introduction into diversity and inclusion work. And I didn't necessarily know what that would then mean for me moving forward, but I just knew that I wanted D&I to be somehow connected to my work. But it wasn't until grad school that I realized that, you know, I could pursue actually in higher education D&I work. And so that's what has, and so my experience has informed my work now, just being that student who was trying to find their place and often felt like they didn't belong and was struggling because it was a time where I was coming from being in a community where I was the majority to entering one where I was in the minority. And it was a culture shock that I had a difficulty navigating. And if it had it not been for that office, I'm not sure that I would have persisted. So I am grateful for that experience, and I'm back to pay it forward and to be able to help students who are like myself and having those same experiences. So I know that was the moment for me where I knew that in some way I would be giving back in a very intentional way based off that experience. And I just want to shout out to Youngstown because I'm a Youngstown native. So shout out to Angela at Youngstown State. My brothers and my dad all are Youngstown State alum. Just throwing that out there.
Well, I guess I'll go next then. Thank you for that. We're always proud of Y-Town. I think, you know, I had one thought in my mind that when I was in grad school and sitting around the table with for department meetings and you know, composition committee meetings, that I met the writing center director and got to know her well then and said, you know, I want your job. How do I get it? And I literally asked her that after one of the meetings. And it was interesting because at the time I had already been accepted to law school. So I kind of changed trajectory at that point, but I might have pivoted sooner than that too, because I also have a bachelor's of science in focusing on biology. So I wanted to edit science textbooks, but this kind of work here where I get to still help people edit people's work and also become better writers and help them through the revision process and the brainstorming. You know, I get to help more people than I guess, you know, just publishing companies and such this way. So I'm kind of glad where I ended up. But listening to your stories too, it made me think, you know, I'm a first gen college student, and my sister went before me, and you know, she became a teacher, and she teaches science in the Youngstown City schools now. And I certainly wouldn't have gone to YSU and probably wouldn't have gone into education without her role model too.
Well, a fairly similar story, Angela. I went to my master's degree thinking, well, preparing for a professional communication track. And really the influence of a faculty member there at the graduate school strongly encouraged me to apply for a position that was open at his alma mater. And I really frankly applied just so I could tell him I had, and maybe he would leave, you know, quit bugging me about it, to be truthful. So I did, and then ended up with an interview and, you know, kind of went down this path of teaching. Now, I do remember coming home from first grade and making my younger brother listen so I could teach him everything I did at class that day. So maybe I was born to be a teacher. He tells me that. But I will say honestly, being a professor was just a rewarding and wonderful experience. You know, moving into administration was just as accidental, and also came because of a mentor who really gave me that kind of shove in that direction. So it's always interesting to look back and think where we end up. But I will say for me, the role of mentors in helping shape those decisions and encourage me to take risks or leaps I would never have taken otherwise have been very powerful in my career.
I also have to say, listening to the bells in the background makes me so excited to be back on campus in a couple months, or what, like a month and a half.
But I guess that leaves me. And I think that, again, this was not something at all I was interested in. as far as a career. It just kind of, you know, when you are teaching people and you're seeing the progress, it just happens upon you. My mother, however, is a teacher by trade, English teacher. And my father was the mortician, and I actually followed his footsteps. But so my mother brought it to my attention recently that I actually followed both of their footsteps. So I guess it was in me to be here, but higher ed was never a thought. And I do owe a lot to one of the other senior vice presidents. Her name is Christina Wanted. She actually saw in me what I probably didn't see in me. And she kept pushing and pushing. And I remember she came to me one time, she's like, you can be the, we need a dean of academics. And she said, so you're gonna be the dean of academics? And I said, no, I'm not. So, but she never gave up, even as many times as I said no. And she would say, well, you're gonna expand this and you're gonna do this. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And every time she would move from department to department, she would call me. She said, I'm being moved. And I was like, oh, no. She said, well, you're going with me. She said, that was my only stipulation. You go with me. So every time she moved in her position, I was the only department she took with me. And so I asked her one day and she said, you don't need a lot of oversight. And she said, and you make me look good. And I'm like, I make you look good. And she's like, yes, you make me look good. And we laugh about these things now, but I too am I'm the first African-American female vice president, now senior vice president at Eastern Gateway. And I didn't see it coming, but I don't have to do anything. And Amanda can attest to this. I'm very vocal, I'm very loud. And I remember one of the reasons that I was honestly put in the Office of Institutional Diversity came when we were writing the letter to support the Black Lives Matter movement. And I said, I might lose my job today, but I'm just gonna say what I have to say. And I said, is that what you think Black people wanna hear? And President Gagan said, well, Carla, we really don't know. And I thought that was so awesome of him to say, we don't know. And I'm like, okay, so let me help you. Like, you know, and Amanda, when I got with Amanda, because she was with the other group at the time, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so excited, let's go. And I'm like, okay, let's go. But, and it takes that voice, it takes that, especially us being females, because this is what this is about. It has to be said, we don't get the same excuse. And by that, I mean, like, a man can do certain things that we can't do, and it's not excusable. And so when we are vocal, when we are present, when we do make ourselves seen, we have to do it with purpose. And I think that one of the things that I've done in my career is I've done everything with some type of purpose. And not that I don't want to be here, because I'm so grateful to be here, but the challenges that we do face in higher ed, I attacked them, and I put my heart into it. And there were things that pulled on my heartstrings, and I'm here to help. And the thing is that in me is that I would not help. And so in pursuing this career, it wasn't in me to quit. It wasn't in me to not help a student or the next person. And I'm that senior vice president that I was over switchboard. And when they would take their lunch, you would see me answering the switchboard. That was me. And I always told them, if I ask you to do something, it's because I too would do the same. And I've lived by that. And I'm so inspired to actually be here that I want to take other people with me. So it's just been really wonderful.
Thank you. So many great stories, and I'm hearing a lot of servant leadership underlying all of this. And I love it. I love it. What are the best and worst parts of your daily job? What motivates you to get out of bed in the morning to go to work? And what happens on those days where you go home saying, oh no, what did I get myself into? And same thing, whoever wants to go first, go right ahead.
I went last, so I'll go first. I don't mind. The worst thing is I hate meeting about meetings like that. Like when I go home and I'm like, I've been in 6 meetings and we accomplished absolutely nothing. Like I could really like take the next day off after that. But I think honestly, that is the worst thing about this position is that we meet and then we have to have another meeting, or we have to go meet with 2 other people to come back to the other meeting. And it's like if matter of fact, we don't have to have another meeting. I'll just solve the problem and then come back and let you know how it's going to go. But that's that bossiness in me. And but I think I love the interaction with my staff the most. Like, it's the small victories that we accomplish together that like really set me on fire. Like I got to get up the next day and do it all over again. I absolutely love my staff, and it shows. I mean, we laugh together, we have fun together, and I have found. I know was given one time I was given, can't think of the word, but anyway, they came to me, they're like, well, you're a little too friendly with your staff and this, that, and the other. And I said, well, let's look at whose staff works the hardest on the campus. And at the end of the day, my staff works hard. They go around, they do, above and beyond. 5 o'clock is not a thing. Matter of fact, you all probably just saw somebody handed me a folder at 6:30. He's just now leaving, been here since 8. And he's going to be back at 8 o'clock to do it all over again with no problem. So at the end of the day, it's the small victories with my staff that I absolutely love that keep me coming back.
Oh, I'll go. Okay, I'll follow my colleague, my friend and colleague, Carla. I think it is like she said it, and I'll elaborate on it a little bit, but it's like those little wins. We are doing, especially in higher education, when you really think the magnitude of what we do, there's a lot of big things that we get to do, but sometimes it is just that small thing. Like when I started, I think one of the biggest issues we had, that at least I heard about, was our advertising. If we were consistently advertising, everybody universally did not like the creative. And it was one of the things when I first came in, it was, that was the big challenge, is getting this in a place where we have buy-in, and we build a program that's consistent and has a message that is aligned with our mission and our vision and our core values. But again, something that is going to excite a very savvy and sometimes very blunt internal constituency. So that was probably one of the biggest small wins I had, was we created a budget, got creative on track, had a faculty meeting where I presented it and kind of like went like this the whole time as we were presenting it. And it was really well accepted. So I think that was one of those things of, it was just an ad, and it was, received well by our faculty. But for me, it was huge. I think one of the most challenging, or one of the kind of, I guess, a bad day is sort of when the bureaucracy gets you down. It's so easy to get, Carla said, meeting to meet about meetings. But it's also in the little ways. It's in, and it's strange for me in my communications and marketing, but I guess it's more the strategic initiatives role of making sure rules are being followed, because reputation and brand management fall under my portfolio. And it is that little stuff. It's celebrating the little stuff, but it's also the little stuff that can become really big issues. So I think that's it, of making a bureaucracy manageable and usable, and accessible to your staff and faculty, so that it doesn't become a burden. And that's one of the things I challenge with. I feel challenging every day.
this is probably too case specific, but over the past 18 months, I have both been extremely grateful for Zoom and I have cursed Zoom because, grateful because it let us do the things we needed to do, and grateful because it meant you could do, Carla, 10 meetings in a day without leaving your chair. But it also meant you spent 10 hours staring at a screen all day long. And that is hard, right? It's physically hard. I think it's emotionally and psychologically hard. So, but I'm grateful. So I don't want to sound like, I'm very grateful for Zoom, but I am also glad that we now get to do some meetings in person or just get to take the walk between meetings to give you a chance to shift gears. Because I would say really the hardest part of my job is just sometimes that lack of reflection between A and B and C. You all have portfolios that are so dynamic, and just I miss that chance. The 10-minute between classes where you can drop this notebook and pick up that notebook and think, okay, now we're going to talk about this. You don't always have that in an office setting, and I do miss that deep breath and love it when I get to have it.
I don't know that I have, I guess, things that I don't enjoy the most. It probably just the tasky things that I have to do that kind of keep me from being able to do the more visionary work. But I know that it's necessary in order to be able to get things done. So I don't always enjoy that, but I recognize how important it is. And somebody asked me today what I love most about our students. So I would say students is what gets me up every day. I mean, you all are the reason why we do the work that we do. But someone asked me today what I love most about our students. And one of the things that I said was that they're just incredibly entertaining. And so I look forward to coming in and a student just saying something that just kind of breaks up the monotony of my day, that just makes me laugh and just brings me joy after being so focused in on something that I've been doing. To be able to step away from that and just engage a student in a different way, I think it just keeps me going. And I always appreciate those moments.
I think that I probably belabored the negative points, right? That we're, it's not enough money and not enough time, right? Are the struggles, but or that balance that we talked about already. And I think that the positives are the same things that you guys have already iterated in that when you see other people's success and that you were just maybe even a small part of that, and you can celebrate with them, that those, and sometimes those don't happen every day. So I think that's, but so you just have to get to the next one, right? Because it doesn't have to be big rewards, but when somebody they pass a class, or somebody goes on and wins an award, or they just had a good day and they come back and say, you were tough on me, but I appreciate it. Those keep you going to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. The last question, this will be the last question, I guess, that I have for you guys before we open the floor to questions from anyone who may have other questions. So those of you who have questions, go ahead and get them ready. We'll be there soon. My last question for you all is, what advice might you have for women, maybe, college students even, that are aspiring to have careers like yours, who are looking to get into higher education, that are looking to make that impact?
I'll jump in again with the twisty turvy career path that brought me here. I think it is one of those, whether it's higher ed or you are in higher ed and thinking, is this what I want to do? I actually learned this on it's fortune cookie wisdom. I read it on a fortune cookie a long time ago, but it really stuck with me. It's everything serves to further. So it might not be, that you might be working at an internship that's not in higher education. That's really where you want to be, but you're going to take something out of there that's going to help you keep building. So, don't ever look at experiences, so narrowly that you don't lose sight of the lessons you can learn along the way that will lead you here.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go. I guess my advice for people who want to in anything is that no one starts at the top, but if you climb, it's worth it. And if I can share with you one of my favorite poems, I won't read the whole thing, but it's our greatest fear. So our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And it goes on to say that we are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So I read this to my class, especially my high school equivalency classes. The first day that I go in, I read that to them. And I put it up on my door to my office, and I don't forget that every day. And when people are struggling, I make them read that. It's not that we are inadequate. It's not that we are not anything. We are all of those things. We are great, and you are great, and you just have to tap into your greatness. And so that would be my advice, is that in any career, whether it's higher ed, whether, as my father would say, if you want to be a garbage man, woman, I don't care. You just be the best. You make sure your uniform is clean every day. You go in there, and then one day you become the boss of the garbage truck people. Okay. So, and that has always been my goal. No matter what. I mean, I started out in fast food. I became a manager while I was in high school. As soon as I turned 18, it just echoed to me when my father said that you go in and you be the best at whatever you decide to do. And that would be my advice.
I love that advice. I think it's sometimes so easy, especially when one is young and starting a career and you're not sure if the path you're on is the one you want to be on, or you've been on it for 18 months and you realize it is not where you want to be, that you have you have the capacity for choice, and you have the capacity for excellence, and that every step does take you further. And boy, that does sound like a really poorly written fortune cookie, Amanda. But, I remind myself of that. I sometimes think the most important influence on my ability to be a college administrator was being a yearbook editor in high school. I learned so much. I was a yearbook editor actually for 3 years, which says something. I loved it, but working with people and setting deadlines and helping people meet deadlines when they didn't want to, and telling a story of the importance of what was happening in an educational year. I look back on that and think so many lessons have helped. And it's still nice to be able to do a quick layout if I need to put together something in my office. I still remember some of those skills. So, I love that idea, Amanda, that experiences add up, and that I do think it's tempting sometimes to say, I don't have to worry about this. It's not important. Nobody's going to notice. And I will just end by saying, my mother told me this at least 14 times a day while I was growing up, that if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. As I made up my bed again, or re-vacuumed the floor because it didn't meet her expectation. But boy, that mantra in my head is a good reminder we bring our best. We find a cause we love. For me, it's the mission of this institution. It's serving our students. And you tell yourself you want to bring your best because it matters. And that helps you get out of bed every day, even on rainy, stormy days.
So I don't know if anybody has been following Nicole Hannah-Jones and what she's been experiencing with UNC, and now she is a full-time faculty at Howard. But regardless of how you feel about what has been happening there, she had done an interview where she was talking about being a Black woman basically navigating this world. And she said that, some people may not make it. You may not make it. But if you do make it, whatever making it looks like for you, make sure that you make it intact. And she essentially was saying that however you are choosing to show up, that should be enough. No matter, because we tend to, and I can speak for myself as a Black woman, tend to try to negotiate parts of ourselves to feel like in order to be able to fit in a particular space, especially in predominantly white spaces. So what does it look like for us not to find ourselves doing that so much so that we lose who we are? And so one thing that really landed with me about what does it look like to maintain who you are as you advance. And so that is my advice, is however far you go, in whatever way you advance, remain intact. Don't give up parts of yourself because you feel like it is more valuable than who you really are. So that's my advice.
I think all of you have offered wonderful advice, and I, when I was kind of reflecting on questions for tonight, I think that really just lift one another up on your journey. I think that it's really tempting to try to get ahead, to step on people along the way for really aggressive, dedicated, directed people. But I think, Carla, like your story of your colleague says, you're coming with me, right? Like that's the kind of thing that I love to hear. And I think that if we all, particularly with women, if we reach out and, make sure that people, we don't view people as competition, but as collaborators. And, if we could see everybody at the top, right? I think that, I can't remember. It might have been Ruth Bader Ginsburg who would, but not, I might be getting the female justice wrong at this point, but she had said that sort of like, we shouldn't stop until SCOTUS is all female. Like we had an all male, Supreme Court for years. So why would it be so weird to think that we should have an all female court at some point? So I think it's that kind of, goal, right? That like, it should just be the norm of that it's just people doing things, that women can do anything. And we shouldn't look at it as anything different than when a man accomplishes it as well. So go ladies, help one another.
Angela, crazy you mentioned that. I was just reading an article the other day written by a man that was like same kind of message. Imagine if it was normal for women to be the president or to make up the majority of Congress. Completely agree. And I love that message. You all have wonderful advice for us, and I really appreciate it. That said, I will open the floor to questions. Feel free to type in the chat. I have the chat window open, so we can, do it that way, or feel free to unmute and ask questions too.
Oh, hi. I have a statement to say to everyone. I like the statements that I thought were dear to me is what you said, Miss Carla, is that when you mentioned that your father told you, like, be the best garbage man or woman that you can be. Uh, I watched my mom over the years being a single parent, and I know being a single parent isn't easy to African American to an African American man and woman, which is myself. And she struggled raising me and my brother, and she always told me and my brother to reach for our dreams and to be the best uh whatever we can be in our life. So right now he's in the military and I work as an admin for people with disabilities. And my mom always said to like strive for whatever you want to be and just not worry about how other people may see you as, but just know I always, for me, my mom's approval is all that matters to me. I don't worry about what the world say. I don't worry about, trying to please everybody. And I like your statement too, Miss Candace. Actually, I like everybody's statement. Yours, Miss Candace, Miss Amanda, Miss Kathy. I like everybody's because, it's really inspiring women to actually like believe in themselves because like nowadays, like with women, we have so much low self-esteem that we don't think we can do anything. And my mom, she's an EGC student just like me, and she's 67 and I just turned 30. So she's going back to school because she wants to, go back to school for me and to support me and everything. And I help her with her homework all the time. And she always just tell me just to believe in myself and, don't worry about the world say, as long as, you have confidence in yourself, then you can do anything. I never put I can in my vocabulary. I always say I can do anything just as good as the next person is. And I never put anybody on a high pedestal because I think that a lot of times people feel intimidated by people with degrees. And, and I'm sitting there like, well, why? I mean, they're people just like you, just treat everybody as equals.
Can I say something? Well, thank you, Maya, for that. And I'll share something with you. I actually, even though my parents raised and reared us together, I come from a single mother and father background. So my mother and they were married, but they divorced. And I saw a lot of rough days. A lot of while both of my parents were really trying to climb. We did a lot of that. I remember eating chicken pot pies for dinner because we didn't have enough money to eat anything else. I remember my mother crying herself to sleep because we didn't have enough food to eat. So she would not eat so that we could eat. And she was a school teacher, but she taught in the Catholic school system when she first came out. On top of that, she didn't get her degree until I think I was in the second grade and my sister. So don't give up. I mean, because it can happen. Today, she's very successful today. My father ended up very successful, but you don't get there without the climb. And it doesn't matter when you started and it doesn't matter when you finish. You just got to make the climb. So good luck to you. And I'm just, thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great discussion. Thank you. Any other questions?
So I have two questions. I'll ask one of them, and then if we have time or if no one else wants to ask a question, I'll ask it. So my first question is, DE&I is a very big topic right now. And obviously throughout this discussion today, it was brought up multiple times. Within the scope of higher education, how do we address the need and that impact that we need to have in that scope, but also not lose, in my opinion, the true purpose of college, which is to challenge someone's way of thinking, their ideologies, their beliefs, which ultimately is supposed to make you grow. If you go into college and you're the same person 4 years from that time, you did something wrong. Someone told me that, and that growth, a lot of the time, is uncomfortable. So my thing is, how do you focus on diversity, inclusion, and the D&I, and make people feel welcome, comfortable, and that they belong, but not lose that piece? And one of the other things which is a part of this, I think, is you're seeing this within employers, government, and now in higher education, where there's a new type of discrimination. which is we are treating people differently on the basis of their COVID-19 vaccination status. We're scared of COVID, where people are fatigued. It kind of reminds me of the way that we treated people that had HIV and AIDS back when we had no idea what that disease was. People were afraid to touch people back then that had that disease because we didn't know how you caught it. And so basically they were outcasted. Thankfully today that isn't the same thing. But my thing is, how do you not lose that purpose of college? But also, how does DE&I within higher education try to negate this new type of discrimination that is spreading across the country? And that's kind of my question. Or whoever wants to talk about it and answer it.
I can give a response. Let me process your question before offering a response, though. And also just to clarify, so you're asking, how do we basically do D&I work without losing what you said, the purpose of education? And when you say the purpose of education, can you talk a little bit more about that? Is that?
Yeah, so basically.
Or I'm sorry, the purpose of college.
Yeah, so the purpose of college to me is for people to go in and they change. If you go into college and you're the same person as the day you walked in my opinion, you did something wrong. And so with that is you go into college and your professors, your administrators, your fellow classmates, we're all there to challenge each other, to basically knock down our belief systems and build them back up. Which that growth on changing your entire mind over a 4-year period is painful, it's uncomfortable. A lot of the time you don't want to do it, but how do you do that, but also make sure that DE&I is being heard? But there are some, like, for example, when Safe Spaces first came out, for example, one of the things that happened with that is people cried safe space only because they were uncomfortable, but uncomfortable wasn't because of what the true purpose of safe space was supposed to be. It was some of them were uncomfortable, but what education does to your, in general. So my question is, how do you not lose the true purpose of education, which is growth and challenging yourself, which is uncomfortable, but also make sure we protect DE&I in the same token?
Okay. So my first thought is, when talking about the purpose of education and challenging and stretching students, I think the work of D&I is actually going to do that because what majority identities have defined as norm. And so for some people, when we talk about these variety of ideas and thoughts and really challenging the inequities in our systems, that's gonna shake people in ways that they haven't been before. But that truth telling needs to happen. When we create those safe spaces for that to happen. So those safe spaces aren't necessarily to keep people from being comfortable, but creating this space for people to be okay with being uncomfortable in this engaging of these more challenging conversations. So I think I don't think it's, these are two separate things, more so than they are happening simultaneously. Because as you are engaging these more challenging topics, you are also growing, you are also being challenged. So whether, how you feel about certain ideas is you're either going to further stand firm in how you believe, or you are going to be able to shift your thinking to be able to understand other people's perspective. So I don't even know if that makes sense. In my mind, this makes sense. So I don't think it's something that's happening independently of the also learning process.
So like basically, into truest form, that is true.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what I see is those two things happen in silos, where they're being treated as two different things when they're really not. But like, if you take just take the way, for example, that like in K through 12 history compared to history being taught in college, there are two different ways. And it's because in K through 12, you tiptoe around history so that nobody gets uncomfortable about something within history. Because if history has a lot of good, but history has a lot of dark. If you really, and not just in America, throughout the entire history of the earth. But it's how do you basically make D, E, and I in education work as one, so you do not make higher education become tiptoed around what are hot button topics per se, because you could have that happen where, okay, we're just not going to talk about, you already see that technically happening where higher education institutions don't want to talk about race throughout history. Well, we don't need to take race out of history. We need to talk about it. I mean, that's what DE and I really is. And if you take it out of history, you're kind of making the two separate. So it's kind of like, how does the university combat those things in terms of that, where you're making them one, which they should be, and not two separate things, and then making education tiptoed around those topics.
Candace, do you mind if I say something? Or okay. I think one of the things that you need to understand is that in diversity, along with equity, along with inclusion, those are three different words and they all mean different things. So when you have someone like Candace or Carla who's in those offices, that we all have strategic guidelines and things that we are trying to accomplish. And the thing that we're trying to accomplish the most is to make an even playing field for the students. And it has nothing to do with how the education or the presence of the education is being brought forward. If, for instance, if I'm looking at a problem in a program that is not right, then that is my job to try to diversify that academic plan to make sure that it is corrected. Now, as far as bringing equity to the college campus, what that means, Carl, is that the same problems that a transgender would have would not be the same problems that an African American would have. And so I have to make sure that my transgender student is equipped with the same needs that the African American student is equipped with to meet the standard of getting the education. And as far as changing someone's thought process, if we could do that, we would be magicians and not educators, because we can't change someone's thought process on how they think. I get hate mail in the diversity email constantly on how could I support Black Lives Movement? How could I not? Why aren't you support, but that can't be my response. My response has to be, thank you for contacting the Office of Institutional Diversity today. You too are entitled to how you believe. And that's the one great thing about America, is that we are all entitled to think the way that we want to think. But what we're not allowed to do is to hurt other people with the way we speak and the way our actions are to other people. But the Office of Institutional Diversity or diversity, however the school is, we all have a strategic plan. But our overall and overreaching goal is to make sure that we even the playing field for our students with disabilities, with our underserved populations, our people of color, people with different backgrounds. That is our purpose. Our purpose is to even the playing field so that they enter the school or get involved and can succeed. And that's the magic word. Give them the tools that they need to succeed with their educational pathway. So the diversity office never loses sight of the education part of it. It's the getting them the tools they need to perform and to meet goals and to get their education. The other thing is, yes, it's a big word in society. It's big in the workplace. It's big. So Carl, when you see that happening, what that means is they're getting ready to put money behind it. So that's simply what that means. So that means grants are going to start going that way. Money is going to be put in that direction. So when they started throwing the word workforce, then you saw all the money going in the direction of promoting workforce and telling people, hey, you don't have to get a degree to make a decent amount of money. So that's what's getting ready to happen. You're getting ready to see the flow of grants and the flow of money to back this so that we can get the backing that we need to get people the tools that they need to succeed in college. I hope that was helpful. And Candace, did you want to?
I just want to say something real quick. Just to backtrack for a second when Carl, you're talking about the education system before we even get to higher ed and what is or isn't being taught. So we all know that there is a erasure of histories in education. And so I think we need to be reflective about is who is writing our curriculum, who is creating our policies, what do they look like, and who is this intended for? Who is it intended to serve? When there's an absence of diverse perspective and understanding of who is being served, then the policy is not, when there is the lack thereof, then it's gonna be more difficult and an added barrier to actually reach who this policy or this education is intended to serve. And we always have to be mindful of that because this is the reason why there isn't certain histories that are evident are present in our curriculums for that very reason, is because we are taking a step back to look at who is actually making the rules. And so as we progress, we need to be more mindful of that. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation because are there more women that we're thinking about putting in positions? Are there more people of color who we are putting in position? Are there more folks from LGBTQ who we are putting in position so that those perspectives aren't left out of the material that we are teaching so that this is norm as opposed to D&I being something independent of the work that we should already be doing. It should be something that is embedded, and it isn't. And so we still have work to do from way back here of thinking about who is in control, who has authority to create the pathways and to ensure that people are not being left out of the conversation in our curriculum, in our decision making, and in our leadership. All of that matters. So
and I'm glad that Candace and Carla are both working on that with that mindset, because that's wonderful. Because the last thing I want this to do is turn into what K through 12 is today. I've always been taught to look at history from the outside looking in. There's always more to what you read than what's on the paper. So I always look multiple places. So I'm glad that history and decision-making and all of that is a very big part in the way you both do things. And then this kind of goes into the last question, if Lauren, there's enough time to do that, which is, you all are in leadership roles, and when someone takes leadership roles, there's always pushback. So what is your advice for women, where how do you distinguish between the natural pushback and fighting that someone in a leadership position has to take when they take over a leadership position, and gender biases? So I'm not saying gender biases don't exist, because they very much do, but how do you distinguish between someone's doing something because that's a natural leadership takeover position fight, or they're doing it because I'm a woman kind of thing? Like, how do you determine that, and what is your advice for trying to find that balance between how people treat a woman in a leadership position compared to their male counterpart?
Carl, that's such a great question. I was hoping that President Richardson was going to jump in there. He's still hoping that she might.
Well, Carla, I think that it's a challenging question. And I can only speak for me personally. I try when people have questions or expressing opposition, to listen carefully, to listen respectfully, not to make assumptions about what is motivating their behavior or their comments, because I think the most frequent way for me to make a mistake as a leader is to make that assumption, to think for people rather than listening to people. So I always think that what I call respectful listening is a good first step. And to not judge, not to jump to the judgment that something's being said. They're saying this because I'm a woman, or they're saying this because I'm an older woman, or they're saying this because, fill in the blank. That is often our first position, I think, in defense. But it's helpful in a leadership setting to have enough deep breaths, as I call them, to try to get past that instinctive response, to offer people the type of respect and dignity that we want ourselves, and then to see how we address the real issue, if we can, or how we can at least, somebody brilliantly earlier said, sometimes it's nice just to explain the process, that there is a process. It's not just, crazy bureaucracy, or we're not listening. So that really is my advice, to have enough trust and faith in the others with whom you work, to listen respectfully and not to judge that they're making judgments about you because of who you are, or what you look like, or your gendered position, or, all of the above. Carla, does that work?
I was just going to add to that, and learn how to pick your battles. That's what I do with my husband, and it has been great here as well. I just pick my battles.
I have a question. Actually, it's both questions. I left it in the chat for Candace and Carla. My question is, you both speak highly about diversity. I want to ask a question by you both being the only African American panelist in your line of work. Has it been a challenge for you both? Because, for my experience, I know with being in school, it hasn't really been easy on me. And Ms. Carla, you spoke a lot about diversity and dealing with LGBT and people with disabilities. I have an intellectual disability myself. So I kind of got the blunt harshness of how people treat me when they don't know my information, and how they look at me as being different and don't want to work with me. So I get more help when it comes to, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on camera. I don't know how to word this. I get more help when it comes to like Caucasian women more than I get help from my own race. And that kind of bothers me, because as soon as I tell them, hey, I have a disability, they don't want to work with me. And I'm like, but why? Like, I have a disability just because I'm different, that doesn't mean you can treat me the same. I mean, treat me any differently, if that makes sense. So my question is, how can other people just learn to coexist and just learn to work with me and get along, work with others? And I'm asking you two because, like, how do you learn to cope with being in a diverse, being in your line of work and being within diversity, by you being the only, African American women on the panelist? It hasn't been easy for you? No? Oh, no. I mean, that's just been on my mind. That's been bothering me. And I've dealt with it growing up. Like, I've always had issues with women in general, especially my own race. And seeing as which, they knew I had a disability, it made it worse. But I get help from Caucasian women more than my own. And I'm like, how can I learn to tell them that this is still me, and just accept me for who I am? And Miss Carla, like, with your line of work, you said you work with diversity all the time, and and you said you received hate mail. I've received, well, I received rude text messages. This is a long time ago, and my mom has had to come to my school and deal with my teachers who are all African American. And I'm like, as I got older, it just became worse, because when I'm in the job market, and now it's just like I'm dealing with women of African American. As soon as they see me, it's a problem with me. And and I tell my mom that, how can I deal with that? So that's why I'm asking you, Miss Carla and Miss Candace.
Well, first, I would like to say that I'm sorry that that has happened to you. And I mean that sincerity, because it shouldn't. And the only thing that I can think of is that if you're receiving help outside of your race or people, maybe they didn't know how to help you. And I think that sometimes people, especially people who have gotten somewhere, they don't know necessarily how to tell someone, I don't know how to help you. So instead they kind of shun you or push you away, or they don't know how to reach you or how to help you. And so instead of being open and honest about their own ability, they shun you or push you away. And that's the only thing I can think of that would even make sense on why someone would not help another person, especially when you see them trying to do the right thing. And that just like breaks my heart, because in the Aspire program that I teach a lot of people with disabilities. I'm also over the disability department here at the college. So that like breaks my heart that people wouldn't help you, because I think that those are sometimes the students that have the hardest struggles, because you don't wear a sign that says disability. And so a lot of people don't understand what they cannot see. We see color, we see other things, but that disability issue is something that a lot of people, unless they're in a wheelchair or something like that, people don't see it and they don't understand it. And it's almost like it's not real because I can't see it. Or you're performing well in my class, so why do you need extra time to take a test? Because you're doing well. And it's not for them to understand, it's for them to accommodate you. And I think that that may, have been an issue. The other thing is that years and years and years ago, this was not as up front and center as it is now. So people didn't even understand things the way that they did. Mental illness was not even considered an illness. You were crazy, or that person has problems, but it's real and it's a real issue. And so now we help those people, and we want to see them do better. And people with bipolar disorder can actually function in the workplace. So things have changed. And I think, again, people are afraid of what they don't know. And Candace, you can jump in anytime there, if you have more to add.
I want to make sure that I'm actually responding to your question. So can you tell me what your question is, or are you asking about my experience?
Well, I was asking about the experience and the question that I just said. Sorry, I got confused, because it's like I had the thought in my head, but it made sense in my head. So it's just like speaking about it out loud. And normally I don't I don't talk about it because
Mhm.
it's not the fact that I'm ashamed. It's just ignorance. And a lot of, and I don't waste my time worrying about people that are ignorant because I'm me and I know who I am. And, I work around people with disabilities all day. I work with ADHD, bipolar disorders, and they function just like everybody else. But the thing is, when you have low education and you have people that are not willing to learn and not willing to grow, then it's bad. So my question, Miss Candace, for you is like, since you're the associate dean of students and you're African American, has it been an easy process for you to get to where you are, or you had struggles or complications along the way?
Yeah, I think the challenging thing about being Black and also doing DEI work is just the exhaustion, because you are experiencing the the same issues that you are trying to help students process through. You're experiencing it also, and so it is, especially I think about last summer, at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement and what that meant to me. And as I was trying to process that, and it was heavy, but then I realized that I had to also straighten up so that I can also figure out ways to be present for students who are also trying to process it too. And so I found, I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, what does it look like for me to take care of myself enough to be able to be present for the whom I'm serving. So I found that to be a struggle for me. And yeah, that's weighty. So I would say that has probably been the biggest struggle with being Black and also doing DEI work. And one thing I would say to the comments that you made just about the lack of support that you have gotten, I echo a lot of the sentiments that Carla has stated, but I'm also glad that there are folks who are present to be your support, because what we want at all of our institutions are those folks who are going to respond. And so kudos to the ways that those staff members have done that in a way that has lifted you up and supported you. And realize that you can do it and make it through, whatever it is that you are trying to make. So I'm happy to hear that you still have found that support.
Oh yeah, I have my mom 100%, my brother, my friends, the employees at my job. Like, I have everybody to support me, but I still struggle a little bit because when people mistreat me, because when they find out I have a disability, it really sets me back to my childhood, because in school, I didn't have it easy at all, bullied a lot and picked on because of my hair, my skin complexion, the way I talk and how I carried myself. I carried myself because I watched my mom and she groomed me to have respect for myself and have class and dignity. And it's just, it's bad when you're around low education, because when you're around people with low education, they come up with all types of crazy ideas, and kids are mean. And, I still struggle with it now, but the greatest thing I have is my mom and, the school that I'm in. Like I said, my friends and my boyfriend, my employees. I have a lot of support, but, it still bothers me now that people mistreat people with disabilities. I don't like that, because, I'm a product of that. And like I said, I didn't ask to be the way I am, nor did I have a choice. But to just shun people because of something that they didn't ask to be, to me, that's not right. And I don't like it. And that's why I'm very strong on treating people as equals. I don't care if you're a white, Black, Indian, Asian. I don't care, because I was raised to treat people with respect. And I don't worry about the skin complexion or none of that. I'm not that bent on that. And, I treat people as people. But it does bother me that people mistreat people with disabilities. I don't like that.
Absolutely. I just appreciate you sharing your honesty, and also just like you're incredibly just like self-aware. And
oh yeah. That's why my mom protects me a lot. And even though I'm 30, I just turned 30. I'll always still be the baby. I don't like it, but I mean, she's my mom, and she's my strength, and she's protecting me from anything and anybody. And I mean, I talk to her about anything, like literally everything. And she tells me all the time, the world is cruel, but don't let anybody take away your joy and happiness. That's why, I try to keep my head up and try to have a level positive mind. And like I said, I like EGCC. I really do. I wish the school was here in DC. I really do, but it's not.
I also think about what does it look like for you to partner with other people or maybe an office to be able to amplify the issues that you may be hearing, that you may not only be experienced, but you hearing others experience. And not to carry it all by yourself or feel like you have to be like the poster child for it. But what are some ways you can then help to support others? I think maybe something to think about. Like, what does it look like to engage in an organization that is intentional about the ways that they support people with disabilities?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I work with people with disabilities all the time, every day, and I always give them the strength because to stand up for themselves, because the management is bad at my job and the employees look at me as a supervisor, which I'm not. I'm the clerk, but I tell them, to stand up for yourself and don't let anybody tell you what you can and can't do. Now, unfortunately, I have to watch what I say to them because they'll take it what I said and actually cuss the supervisor out. Now, I don't want them to do that, but they do it anyway. I mean, these people have bipolar disorders, ADHD, physical, mental disabilities, and I have to be careful what I say to them because, they listen to me and have respect for me because I show them kindness, and I know how that feels to be shunned. And, I have a bad supervisor now. I don't like her. And I tell her all the time, don't talk to me like that. I have good skills, but it's how you talk to people and it's how you get your point across, and you don't have to be rude to do that. So what I tell my employees all the time is I give them strength and I speak up for them. Like I'm the type of person where I don't care what position you're in, you're still a human being at the end of the day, and I treat you the same.
I hear the advocate and the activist in you, so I just hope folks are right.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to kind of calm that down because, again, like whatever I tell them to do, they do it. And see, the thing with them is I tell them, like, in life, you can't worry about what everybody thinks of you, because at the end of the day, when you know your goals and you know who you are on the inside, forget everybody else, and I'm trying to tone that down a little bit because, like I said, again, everybody's disability is different. Nobody's the same. And I've learned to like accept who I am, and I'm not ashamed of who I am.
That is wonderful. And, amen to what Candace said. I hear it in you too. I put my email. An advocate? Yes. I put my email in the chat because I am over disabilities at Eastern Gateway, and I'm also over diversity. So give me an email sometime. And next time I'm in DC, because I come up there for training a lot, I'll bring you some gifts from EGCC. Okay.
Oh. Well, I found you on LinkedIn already, Miss Carlin. You too, Miss Candace. I already found you guys. I already found you. Yeah, but DC is very good. I mean, I have no problem with public speaking. I've spoken in front of 350 people before. I went to my middle school prepared me of public speaking. I've spoke 3 times, and I've always said, and I carry with me today, don't be afraid to speak up. If somebody's mistreating you, you have a right to stand up for yourself. Like, don't let anybody talk down on you and make you feel bad. I mean, hey, I cuss my supervisor out all the time, every day. Matter of fact, I cussed her out today because, when about this women in leadership program, she said, "Oh, who is that?" I said, "None of your business." I mean, I don't like her. I mean, I tell her to her face, I don't like her. Sorry.
But we're gonna work. You email me. I'm gonna work with you on how to tell her correctly.
Well, that I don't like her. I just
I
don't like her. I can't say that. Well, I'm
I
working
love
on
it.
it. I'm working on it. I don't like her.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. I do want to wrap things up because we have gone well over our allotted time, but thank you again to all of you so much for joining us tonight. This has been a fantastic conversation. And thank you, and We appreciate you.
Thank you. Good
Have a
night.
great week.
Thank you, Lauren.
Carla,
Appreciate it.
I want to
Yeah.
ask Carla something.
Yes,
So you were a mortician? with
yes,
your dad, is it Martin's up in Cleveland?
that is my husband's, H.M. Martin's.
Right,
That was
right.
his family. Yeah, that was his family.
Okay,
We left there in 2008 and moved to Steubenville. We own Gregory Martin here in Steubenville.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
'Cause I lived in Cleveland for 30 years and then I
Oh,
retired
okay.
and came back to
So-
Youngstown.
Yeah, yeah, they're still there on 131st Street.
They are,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Cool,
Yeah, small world.
it is. And I wanted to ask Kathy something real quick, and these are not like real program related questions. Kathy, you had mentioned that something about music. I heard that in passing when you were talking about your background. Did you teach in music or no? Or did you study music?
No, my PhD's in mass communication, my master's degree is in journalism.
Right, and you went to University of Georgia.
Yes, for those 2 degrees, yeah.
Yeah. And I worked at University of Georgia
Oh, nice, very
Yeah.
nice.
at the library.
Well, great.
All right, thank you, ladies. Maya, it's always nice to see you.
Thank you all. Pleasure to meet you all.
You as well. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Bye.